1. Around 400 million years ago, if you didn't have a rock-thick layer of armor covering your body, you were pretty much just a mobile meal waiting to be devoured. The ocean back then was not a place of speed or intelligence, but a sluggish battlefield where every creature donned rock-hard protection, from fish to mollusks, all developed various forms of armor to survive. But if you look at the world today, you will see the exact opposite. The vast majority of the most successful creatures are soft, flexible, and almost entirely devoid of any armor. This raises a paradoxical question. Why did nature spend millions of years perfecting an ultimate defense only to almost completely erase it later? What caused life to change its survival strategy? And are we misunderstanding how evolution truly works? To understand this, we must go back to the era when biological armor dominated the ocean, when creatures known as placoderms emerged and became apex predators for tens of millions of years. These were fish with a thick layer of bony armor covering their heads and front bodies, not simple scales or shells, but massive interlocking bone plates forming an almost impenetrable layer of protection. One of the most terrifying representatives of this period was Doncleosteus, a giant creature that didn't have teeth in the conventional sense, but instead used sharp, scissor-like bone plates capable of self-sharpening and generating a tremendously powerful bite force nearly on par with a Tyrannosaurus rex. Its sole purpose was to shatter the armor of other creatures, creating an arms race where the solution to a shield was always a bigger hammer. At that time, most predators were still slow and inefficient, making a thick layer of armor the perfect defensive strategy. You didn't need to be fast or smart, just hard enough not to be swallowed whole. In a world where everything moves slowly, armor solved almost every problem nature presented. If bitten, the opponent was essentially biting in a rock. If crushed, the armor could withstand the force. If attacked by claws, the attacker itself risked injury. The ocean back then was like a battlefield where creatures clashed in slow, heavy confrontations rather than high-speed chases. However, this very dominance created a new evolutionary pressure. As some species began developing more powerful tools to break through that armor, Dunkleosteus wasn't the only one, but rather part of a broader trend where creatures gradually evolved into living hammers capable of smashing seemingly invincible defenses. This arms race didn't stop. It continuously escalated and laid the groundwork for a massive shift in how organisms survived. But armor wasn't a free gift. To acquire that protection, creatures had to pay an incredibly steep biological price. When you carry bone plates that are centimeters thick, you become heavy, rigid, and move as slowly as a rock underwater. You can't be agile, you can't accelerate, and you lose almost all ability to dodge. Not only that, creating and maintaining that bony armor consumes a massive amount of energy, minerals, and resources from the body itself. Things that could have been used to develop muscles, improve internal organs, or enhance mobility were instead diverted to nourish the armor. For a long time, this price was still worth paying because the armor was truly effective. But that only held true until the environment changed. As predators began to become more efficient, the strategy relying entirely on armor started to reveal its weaknesses. Some fish developed flat, powerful teeth like industrial crushers, allowing them to simply crush the entire armor without needing to find a weak spot. Other creatures took a completely different approach, such as predatory snails that developed the ability to drill through shells using acid and a sandpaper-like structure, creating a perfect little hole through the thickest defenses. At that point, armor was no longer an absolute shield, but became a lunchbox, and the predator had the key to open it. This was the turning point. When a defense system can no longer truly protect you, it ceases to be an advantage and becomes a burden. While armor became increasingly ineffective, predators and prey began developing a completely different strategy: speed. Instead of trying to be invulnerable, creatures started focusing on becoming faster, more agile, and harder to touch. The ocean gradually transitioned from a place of slow collisions to an environment of high-speed chases. In that context, armor was no longer a strength but a hindrance dragging you backward. If you can move twice as fast as a predator, you don't need to be as hard as a rock, because the opponent will never be able to touch you. Speed became a flexible form of defense, consuming energy only when necessary rather than constantly like armor. When creatures abandoned armor, they suddenly had a massive surplus of energy and began investing in other things, such as better senses to detect danger from afar, larger brains to process information, and most importantly, the ability to reproduce faster. In the long run, evolution realized that creating many vulnerable but fast reproducing individuals was more efficient than trying to protect a single near-immortal one. This is a rather cruel truth, but an incredibly effective one. Instead of ensuring no individual gets eaten, the species just needs to reproduce in such vast numbers that predators can never wipe them all out. Another major problem for armored creatures is their lack of evolutionary flexibility. When your body is encased in a hard layer of bone, you are practically locked into a fixed shape and find it very difficult to change when the environment fluctuates. Meanwhile, soft-bodied creatures can adapt faster, altering their anatomy, shape, or mode of locomotion to suit new conditions. When mass extinction events occur, rigid creatures are often the first to disappear because they cannot adapt quickly enough to a changing world. Although the vast majority of creatures have abandoned armor, there are still exceptions like turtles and crabs. These species survive by living in specialized environments where speed is not the deciding factor. They don't try to compete with agile predators, but instead choose ecological niches where their opponents are equally slow or lack the tools to break their armor. This is a specialized strategy that works well, but only under very specific conditions. Today, the most successful creatures, like sharks or whales, have almost no hard armor. Instead, they have developed bodies optimized for speed and efficiency. Sharks have lightweight cartilaginous skeletons that help them move fast, while whales use a thick layer of blubber as a flexible form of protection. These forms of soft armor don't completely block attacks, but help minimize damage while still retaining mobility. In theory, armor could make a comeback if environmental conditions change, but in the modern world where speed and intelligence play crucial roles, this possibility is very low. Even if a creature with incredibly hard armor were to appear, intelligent predators could find other ways to kill it without needing to break the armor, such as using blunt force trauma or tactics. Evolution is not a contest to find the strongest design, but a race to find the most flexible one. Armor was once the symbol of invulnerability, but it ultimately became a burden that caused many species to disappear. And perhaps, in this world, it is not the strongest that survives, but the most adaptable. If you found this story interesting, please hit like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future videos.